Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. Lucinda, I think we're ready to start. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Angie, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. I see we're up at 88 participants. It's a fantastic turnout for this briefing. Welcome. My name is Lucinda O'Hanlon. I'm the Senior Advisor on Policy and Strategy at SWA. And we're here today because in 2021 and beyond, SWA has a priority focus on climate. And we want to present that to you today and talk with you about what it could mean for our work together as a partnership. The reason why we have this focus really comes from interactions with you, our partners, whether it's through the bilateral contacts that you have with my colleagues, whether it's through the contributions that were made in the regional roadmaps or at the high-level meetings, the finance ministers meetings that we had last year. This climate came out quite strongly. And I think in general, as a global community, we recognize that effective climate action now is indispensable for our future on this planet, including in terms of water, sanitation, and hygiene. I also want to say that our focus on climate action links to all the work that we've been doing over the past year on COVID and trying to ensure that we build back better and that we establish a sustainable and resilient recovery plans, both in terms of the pandemic and the economic crisis that we're facing. So if I could just ask everybody to put themselves on mute if you're not speaking, that would be great. So today's just a first conversation to introduce the topic to the partnership. And as you'll hear in the presentations, there are plans in place for us to talk more. We have a presentation from our climate advisor, Mr. Jose Gesti, and we'll start with that. And then we'll have some remarks also from our partner from the United Kingdom, the FCDO, Andy Roby, who is a climate advisor there. And then it will be open for questions and discussion. We have 1 hour for this call. We'll try to keep things on track. We know everyone has busy schedules. And with that, Jose, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucinda and colleagues. It's great to see a great participation today when we are having this framing discussion around the sanitation and water for partnership focus on climate. So as Lucinda had already let us know, we have some slides that we're going to be presenting. And if you allow me a second, I will try to share my screen. So, if you colleagues can let me know.
We can see your screen, Jose.
Perfect. I'm going to do presentation mode. So hopefully you're seeing my screen.
Yes,
and
we
then
are.
Apologies because I won't be able to see the chat box or anything, as you know that I'm just seeing my own screen. So yes, let's go into it. We have prepared this initial kickoff discussion that it's framed around two key areas. The first one is around, as we say, the SWA focus on climate action, and it goes about the what, but also the how do we go about this. And then the second part of this set of slides will also cover some entry points to leverage climate action. We will do a brief intro about the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, and we will see some of the entry points on national climate planning for the water and sanitation sector, and later on, as Lucinda has also explained, our colleagues from the UK will talk a little bit and give you some insights about the upcoming conference of the Paris in Glasgow. So what I wanted to do is to start this session and the presentation by making a brief introduction on the impacts of climate change on water, sanitation, and hygiene services, and how is that connected to SWA strategic framework. So climate change and the global climate crisis is exacerbating existing challenges. We know about that. We know how it's making the universal provision of water, sanitation, and hygiene services even more difficult. So we like to illustrate things in a graphic way by making you think about the added complexity of providing sanitation for those communities that live in flood-prone areas, and also to drive your attention on the difficulties of providing safe drinking water to disperse rural communities, for example, that are exposed to increasing incidents of droughts. These are just a few examples, but they are illustrative. Think also about the gender dimensions, right? Of having to spend hours to fetch water from more distant sources during prolonged droughts. Especially, we know that this burden falls in the shoulders of women and girls. So the SWA strategic framework outlines 3 key objectives, as you can see on the slide. The first one is build and sustain the political will to eliminate inequalities in water, sanitation, and hygiene, to champion multi-stakeholder approaches toward achieving universal access to services, and to rally stakeholders to strengthen system performance and attract further investments. So as you can imagine, and with the background that we have given, climate action cuts across these 3 strategic framework objectives for the sanitation and water for all partnership. But let me go a little bit further and explain how does climate change support SWA theory of change. So in the figure, you can see the 3 SWA objectives that we just mentioned in the previous slide. But then in the lower side of the figure, what you can see is the 5 key objectives of SWA focus on climate change. And the aim is obviously through these 5 objectives on climate action to strengthen the inner 3 circles with the 3 key objectives for SWA. The first objective of the climate focus is to advocate and raise awareness of WAS adaptation needs and mitigation opportunities. And believe me when I say that the climate community is having, in many cases, problems to understand the links between climate change and sanitation, for example, and the links between climate change and hygiene. And also in cases, you know, the climate community is having some challenges to understand the basic needs of water for drinking purposes in comparison with broader conversations on resource management. As a partnership, we really need to agree on our shared and common key messages. The second objective is to promote knowledge and exchange support capacity building of partners. And hopefully this is just the beginning of the journey. This session can just be the beginning of this journey that we are taking together. And we will talk about this a bit later in this presentation. The third and the fourth objectives are core to strengthen SWA theory of change. And this is also big part of what we are discussing today. We are talking about the integration of WAS into climate, national and subnational planning. And at the same time, we are talking about the support climate integration into WAS policies, strategies, and development plans. We will start this conversation a bit later in this presentation. The fifth objective to join forces as a partnership is to foster access to climate financing for WAS. So we have covered now a little bit the essence of what is the SWA climate focus. But let's cover now also briefly some parts of the how are we going about this. So in terms of advocacy and awareness raising, an important milestone has been the publication of SWA briefing note that you have on the screen, adapting to climate change and fostering a low carbon water and sanitation sector. This briefing note, it's available on our SWA website and provides key points for advocacy and awareness raising, but also offers concrete suggestions on how SWA partners can integrate climate change considerations into their planning and actions at global, regional, and national levels. This briefing note also includes checklists that you can use in countries, and those are around the 5 SWA building blocks, as you can see a little preview on the screen. As part of advocacy and awareness raising in SWA, we are also working on the development of strategic op-eds and further communication around this issue. In terms of knowledge exchange, we also want to highlight SWA Tools Portal. Using the search function of the Tools Portal, you can find climate change related tools. Those are developed by SWA partners, and they can help with the implementation of climate action, of these objectives that we are mentioning. For example, in the Tools Portal, you will find the water evaluation and planning tool developed by Stockholm Environment Institute. And there are other very interesting sector tools, for example, one developed by the Global Water Partnership and UNICEF, which is a risk assessment methodology for WAS. And I believe that these tools can really help you, as we say, with implementing WAS and climate actions in countries. Here, we also take the opportunity to call on you partners to make the submission of climate change and WAS related tools. You can use the SWA website to make your submissions, and you will find there the requisites, which these tools need to meet for publication in the portal. Also to draw your attention that reports or case studies of a tool implementation are also very much welcome and can be uploaded in the tools portal. Some of you may be aware and may have even already taken part of the SWA webinars. You know that those provide partners with a platform for a dialogue and experience series of on planning, implementation, and reviewing progress towards SDG 6, particularly SDG 6.1 on universal access to water and 6.2 on universal access to sanitation. The past series of the SWA webinars have shown to us, and you have told us with your comments, that they are useful. They provide a means for countries to learn from one another and to learn from other partners. They are also, we know, an occasion for you to gather in countries, to gather stakeholders around the same table, and to help you frame strategic discussions. We know that sometimes you like to gather to see together and participate of these webinars, and then after that hold the strategic discussions. Last year, we already had some dedicated sessions for climate financing and WAS. And now what we want to do is to take the opportunity to ask you, and you can share your comments in the chat box and later, about the topics that you would like us to address this year. You can please mute your microphones. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to finish the inside.
Sorry, can you please mute your microphones so that we don't have the... Okay. Then, surely you are also familiar with the SWA high-level events and the preparatory processes towards finance ministers and
haut
sector ministers
niveau,
meeting.
réunion
You
des
know,
ministres
with
des
the
Finances,
acronyms,
réunion
the
des
FMMs and
ministres
the SMMs.
sectoriels.
And what the climate focus brings to these
Et ce
high-level
que
events and
l'aspect
preparatory process
climatique
is
apporte
the
à ce
triangulation that you can
processus
see
de
on this figure.
préparatoire, on peut le voir dans ce
Ministers of
triangle.
Environment are
Devant
now also
les
mobilized to connect the
ministres
dots,
de l'Environnement
and
sont
this does not
également
only mean
mobilisés. Aujourd'hui,
that
ça
the ministers
signifie
of
non
environment are invited
seulement
to high-level
qu'ils
events,
sont
but
invités aux
also
événements de
importantly,
haut
preparatory
niveau,
processes
mais très
of
important, ils font
country
partie
engagement and in
du
general
processus
to
d'engagement
help connect the
de
dots,
pays pour
having in
aider
mind the two key
à
objectives that we have
relier
mentioned at the
les parties
beginning of
prenantes
this
et
session,
atteindre les
which is the
deux
integration of
objectifs
WASH
clés,
into climate
l'intégration
national
de
planning,
WASH
and at
dans
the
la
same time
planification
to support
nationale du
climate
secteur WASH,
integration into
secteur
WASH
EAH,
policies,
et
strategies and plans.
permettre l'intégration
This
du
also reinforces
secteur.
the fifth objective that we
Ceci
have mentioned on fostering climate
renforce
financing
les
for WASH
5 objectifs
by
que nous avons
linking climate
mentionnés
WASH
en
Jose, I'm
liant
sorry to
le
Jose,
interrupt.
climat
yeah, Jose,
et le
can we?
I'm
secteur
sorry to
EH.
interrupt. There's a problem with
José,
the translation.
désolé, nous avons un problème de traduction.
The French translator is on the English channel, and we need
Oh.
to get it back to English, please.
No
Yes.
problem. You can
Thank
just
you very
let me know.
much.
No problem.
Please go ahead, Jose.
Shall we continue now?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. So we were just talking about in this slide about the high-level events and the preparatory processes, and how the climate focus is also featuring on these high-level events and preparatory processes. We were just concluding the remarks by saying that that the fifth objective that we have mentioned on fostering climate financing for WASH is also linked to this triangulation that we are showing on the screen, by linking climate WASH priorities and commitments with the discussions we have with ministers and ministries of finance. It is precisely the SWA mutual accountability mechanism that can help us connecting those dots by having climate resilience as at its center. The climate community is telling us and is speaking loudly, sharing some concerns about the challenges for the implementation of climate commitments that are made as part of the Paris Agreement. So one of those challenges that the climate community is voicing is the lack of tools to bridge national climate and sectoral commitments. There is this disconnect between climate commitments and sectoral commitments. The mutual accountability mechanism, by reinforcing multi-stakeholder decision-making and mutual accountability, is going to help us determine climate resilient WASH priorities that can be used both for climate stakeholders to inform their national climate policies, and in the WASH sector to give the priority to those and to make sure that the finance is available to implementation of those commitments. In this slide, what we wanted to show you is some of the key 2021 milestones from a perspective of SWA climate focus. Just 2 weeks ago, the Climate Adaptation Summit, during the Climate Adaptation Summit, SWA successfully made the case for the tremendous adaptation needs of the WASH sector. Other key milestones, as you can see on the screen, will be the World Water Day, the World Environmental Day, the World Water Week to be happening this year online at the end of August. There is a pre-conference of the parties that will take place in Italy the end of September, beginning of October. And then we are moving towards the sector ministers meeting in October, still dates to be confirmed, and the COP26 in Glasgow. So preparatory processes towards the SMM and the COP, are also linked to very important and existing ongoing tracks, like the Water Action Track being one of them, led by the Global Commission on Adaptation, the Marrakesh Partnership with the Climate Action Pathway for Water, among other pathways to which SWA has already been able to contribute and is helping shape. And there are obviously, other key initiatives such as the Water and Climate Finance Initiative led by Water Aid, and there are other SWA partners strongly working with this interface of climate resilient WAS. As you know, country engagement efforts are continuously made to ensure the SWA Secretariat provides efficient and timely support to SWA partners in all countries. These country engagement efforts mobilize and support partners at country level towards the implementation of the SWA framework, and now also includes the climate action objectives that we have discussed. Indeed, country engagement guidance is being now finalized with the integration of a climate focus. In relation to SMM 2021, the upcoming SMM, we wanted to highlight that UNICEF is co-convener, and
Jose, can we hold on a minute? I think there is a problem with the Spanish interpretation. I'm sorry.
No problem.
We seem to have lost the Spanish interpretation. Can we make sure that it's back now? Can someone confirm that the Spanish interpretation is back?
Shall I say something? Yeah.
Cesarina, can you confirm for us, please, maybe? Okay, now it's fine. Jose, please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about the interruption.
No problem. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure that all the translation channels are working. In the worst case scenario, I could do some help with the Spanish one. But yeah, we will continue. So we were talking now on the SWA country engagement support on climate action by reminding about these country engagement processes that and now how we're working now to include this climate focus. We were mentioning that some guidance is being finalized with this integration of climate. And then we were saying that in relation to the SMM, UNICEF is a co-convener, and that we are working to identify a selection of targeted countries for which a template to develop country overviews is also being finalized now. Those country overviews include some proposed template to develop around stakeholder identification for the integration of WAS into climate policy and entry points for WAS in climate integration, the other way around, climate risk to WAS, and resourcing of WAS responses, etc. So as we promised now, the second part is just a few slides to provide some background and start the discussion on concrete entry points to leverage climate action. Just a short recap, for the benefit of all of us, as we, proactively want to start engaging with climate policy and climate processes. Just in, obviously, we can't discuss this in further detail, but just a snapshot, just to remind ourselves about the UNFCCC, which stands for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You know that this is an environmental treaty that is addressing climate change. It was negotiated and signed by 154 states at the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992 and entered into force 2 years later in 1994. Currently, there are 197 parties to the UNFCCC. Also, it sometimes is a little bit confusing, and that's what we wanted to highlight here, that this acronym, the UNFCCC, is also the name of the secretariat that it was established, and it having the headquarters in Bonn. Then the Conference of the Parties, the COPs, and you may know that this is the supreme decision-making body from the UNFCCC. It's having annual meetings, as you know, unless for last year, obviously we know it had to be postponed for the global pandemic. And in these COPs, the progress on climate action is being discussed. Then, indeed, in COP21, in the Conference of the Parties in 21, that happened in Paris in 2015, the Paris Agreement took place, and as far as we're talking right now, the Paris Agreement was signed by the 197 members of the UNFCCC, and a slightly different is to sign and to remain party of it. We have 189 countries that remain party of it. And just for you to quickly make the connection as to what is to sign and to be party, you all know about one country that has become party, left, and now it's on its way back. That's the slight difference. So as part of the Paris Agreement, each country must determine, plan, and report on their contributions to mitigate global warming and also to adapt to climate change. There are, just to bring to your attention that as we submerge into integrating WAS into climate policy, in almost all the countries where you are joining from, you will be able to find already key information that is available to you. Those are in the form of what they are called the national communications that countries make to the UNFCCC. For the less developed countries, you will also have, for the 47 of them, what they were called the National Adaptation Plans of Action, the NAPAs. Those have evolved into the more modern version of the National Adaptation Plans. Differently from the NAPAs, these apply not only to the less developed countries, but to all developing countries. And then you also have available in your countries, at least those that are signatory to the Paris Agreement, the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs. There is also information readily available on climate financing proposals, for example, those made to the Green Climate Fund, to the Global Environmental Facility, and to the Adaptation Fund, just to mention a few. As we're talking about entry points, and here we will invite you to let us know how far do you want us to go in other sessions as to entry points, but just a snapshot on the nationally determined contributions and the NDCs. As we were commenting, they derive from the Paris Agreement for 2015. Country commitments are made to reduce emissions and to adapt to climate change. Our concern is that in many cases, we don't see WAS being well reflected in the NDCs. And therefore, this is an entry point for us to start working and try to address this. Developing nations are the ones, they are the front runners in the preparations to revise the NDCs, while developing countries are more focused on highlighting the adaptation needs. Important for all of us to know, as we are discussing entry points, is that the NDCs are to be revised and updated every 5 years, increasing their ambition for both for mitigation of greenhouse gases emissions and for adaptation to climate change. And what you see on the right side of the slide is this 5-year cycle, where everything starts with the NDC revisions that many of them are taking place as we speak now. There is where we see the need to link the WAS line ministers with the ministers of environment. And you see how this cycle evolves into a moment where the NDC financial strategies and investment plans are discussed. And there is where we think that we really need to work with the ministers of finance. You remember this triangulation that we were talking a few slides before. Then we also have the national adaptation plans, the NAPs or the NAPs as they are referred to. The NAP process was already established a few years back, indeed in COP26 in Cancun. And the aim obviously is to scale up adaptation. There are different bodies that provide already support at the global level, such as the UNFCCC Adaptation Committee, the Less Developed Countries Expert Group, in coordination with the NAP Technical Working Group. The initial goal was to have all the NAPs submitted already by 2020. Again, remember I said earlier that the NAPs, differently from the NAPAs, they apply to all developing countries. But just as an indicator, we should know that as of now, only 4 less developed countries have submitted their their NAPs. So there is a lot of work that is already ongoing in countries for the formulation of these NAPs. The waste sector, we think, is unfortunately at the moment not strongly contributing to NAP formulation. Obviously, there are exceptions in some countries, and those are the ones that we want to identify and highlight as good case studies. Also, to bring to your attention is the fact that the NAPs are also expected to be updated every 3-5 years. Here on the screen, we can see a huge advancement by the Global Water Partnership developing a supplement to the UNFCCC NAP technical guidelines on addressing water in national adaptation plans. And there are other efforts, to try to mainstream water and waste in general into the NAPs that we need to build on. So I think this was from our side what we wanted to share with you as an appetizer, as we said, for discussion. So I will get back to you, Lucinda. I will stop sharing here.
Thank you, Jose. Do you want to put up the slide for the poll?
Sure. Let me just...
So, dear participants, after that very comprehensive presentation from Jose, we just want to put a poll up, which, Angie, I'm looking to you to confirm if people should answer in the chat box.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So we'll just put this these options up to get your opinions on which topics you might value future webinars to be focused on. So this is just a quick scan. If you could answer in the chat box, that would be great. We're going to put up that slide now, but in the meantime, I want to introduce Mr. Andy Roby from FCDO in the United Kingdom, who's very kindly agreed to be with us today to give us some insights on the road to COP in November this year. So Andy, I'm going to, I see something in the chat. I'm sorry, Andy, that there's a problem with the French translation. Could we please confirm that French translation is back?
Je pourrais faire ça en français si ça vous plaît.
Ah, mais c'est très gentil, Andy.
Alors, ça, je suis un peu embêté.
Can we please confirm the French translation?
But Andy, please do select English from the globe down in the bottom of the screen if you're going to speak in English, so that the translators can translate as well.
Okay, great. Have things been sorted out?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so Andy, over to you with your advice and guidance on how to engage with the COP process. And participants, if you could, sorry, Jose, if you could keep the screen up so that participants can put stuff in the chat box, that would be great. Sorry, Andy, over to you.
Sorry, Lucinda, I'm just looking for the translation button. Where is that? I'm really sorry.
At the bottom, it's fine. At the bottom, it looks like a small world and it says interpretation in between record and reactions at the bottom banner. And you click on that and choose English, please.
I'm sorry, I can't see that at all. I wonder if it's because I'm coming from a browser.
There could be an other button for you, and like dots and other, and you can find the option of interpretation as well, and you need to choose English.
No, I don't have that either. I'm really sorry. I've got disabled video receiving and about, so it must be because I'm working off of Zoom on the work computer. What do we do? Yeah, I can't see any other buttons. I'm really sorry.
Are the translators able to translate anyway if he's on the general channel? I think so. I think you can just speak, Andy, and the translators will anyway translate. So please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm sorry for that. It's not prepared for the translation button. I thank you so much. My name's Andy Roby. I'm Senior Water Security Advisor in the UK government for the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, which is where DFID we were merged, the Department for International Development merged with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office about 6 months ago. So we're now a much larger and combined
Il y a
organisation.
6 mois, nous sommes maintenant une organisation bien plus grande.
La COP26 y el cambio climático, y estamos trabajando mucho con la cooperación.
I like to say nowadays that we have 14,000 diplomats giving out messages on development, and I think that's something to bear in mind when you're talking to the UK. We are very much making climate change a priority for all of our foreign policy work, frankly, and a lot of our domestic work as well. And of course, COP26 at the end of this year, as Jose rightly clarified, is the high point of the year for us. But we're not forgetting we're also presidents of the G7 this year, and of course engaged in several other really important events that have a strong relationship to water, and that's the Food Systems Summit and COP15, the Biodiversity Convention, which China is hosting. And I mention these because in the way that we work in the UK, we very much join up all of our work across these different sectors, if you like. And I think that's the theme I want to keep coming back to in the brief presentation, that water is a connector. Water is very much a consumer of water as a resource. It's also a producer of wastewater, and it has implications therefore for oceans and pollution. It has implications for ecosystems, as well as, most importantly, for emissions. And this is an area we have to focus on, I think, as a sector. Emissions from water sector as a whole are thought to be 10% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. This was first calculated, I think, last year and presented in the GIZ report. So the water sector has net zero responsibilities, and we need to step up and make those commitments very clear. I'm very proud to say the UK water industry has led the world in making a commitment to 2030 being net zero. This means our wetlands and our wastewater and all the stuff in between, when you add it all together, is net zero. It's making a zero contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. But I think most of the rest of the time now I want to talk about adaptation, the other half of the climate change issue, because temperatures are rising. As Jose said, we're expecting at least a 1.5 degree rise. And this has massive implications for the water sector, which many of you will be aware of. But in global negotiations, these have not been the focus of attention. And so this year, it is going to be an adaptation COP. COP26 is going to be about rebalancing our efforts when it comes to negotiation and finance and ambition. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So our role in COP26 as president designate is to be prepared to take the ball from Chile, who are looking after COP26, and then to handle the negotiations and make sure that those are as productive as possible. And there are a few things on the negotiations which will be of relevance to you, SWA members, and that is financing. We're looking at reaching that pledge of $100 billion of official development assistance. And I'm very glad to say the UK has again made its pledge of 11.6 billion on climate finance. But I wanted to make this additional point that official development assistance, ODA, is only going to be a small part of what is needed to meet any of our requirements on adaptation going forward. We think the funding gap is $6.9 trillion. And $100 billion is not really going to go very far. That means that we really should be focusing those bits of finance on catalyzing private sector investment. That is where most of the heavy lifting is going to come from. To this effect, we've actually set up a blended finance platform in the UK. We launched that just last week, trying to leverage the private sector, because the private sector has assets worth $110 trillion. I don't know if you can get your head around these figures. These are very large amounts of money. They dwarf public spending massively, probably by a ratio of at least 10 to 1. That said, in the negotiations, we're also focusing on alignment with the Paris Agreement. And this is also very important for the water sector, because some recent work undertaken by ODI has identified a very large flow of subsidy into the water sector, which is a very significant amount of the finance that's flowing into the water. Now, subsidy is a really good thing if you're a poor person, but some of it is misdirected, and some of the money is spent effectively on making water cheaper than it should be. So a lot of work is necessary looking at water pricing. These are the sorts of policy reforms that are fairly cheap on paper to achieve. They don't require public finance. They require changes in regulation and policy. Which country is that from? They do require political capital. And that's a really important point for all of us as we're working towards COP26. So COP26, another stepping stone, an important event. It's not the end. It's the beginning, we hope, of the end. It's the beginning of a much stronger commitment globally, not just on financing, but also tackling the causes of climate change. We're thinking in the water sector, particularly about UN Water 2023, which is just a little over 2 years away. And that's a very big moment in the global water calendar, and something that, again, the UK wants to put a lot of effort into. Water has been low on the list of priorities globally. It's not recognized as a global crisis. And yet you, like I, am very well aware of what's going on and the sort of water security issues the world is facing. So back on to the UK and our role in COP26. The way we're tackling this is very much through campaigning. This was the first COP which has a series of campaigns. This sounds a bit like marketing, but it's really trying to use what we have in strength, which is a global diplomatic corps of 14,000 people, to focus on key issues that we want negotiating partners to come to the table with. So there are 5 campaigns formally in COP26. There's transport and energy, which of course have water elements to them. But I think most importantly are the 3 others: adaptation and resilience, as I've mentioned already, finance, and a 5th one called nature. And I want to focus on that a little bit more a little bit later on. But definitely adaptation and resilience is the way that we are going to have to respond to climate change. And for this, think of adaptation in 2 ways. First of all, preparing for predicted change in weather, in water quality, things which we know are going to happen, which we can to some extent predict, and therefore building more robust structures to deal with it. For water and wash, that means particularly storage. We're going to have to deal with shortages of water because rainfall patterns will change. But we're also going to be concerned about water quality. That is going to be impacted by climate change as well. And then I think the second element of adaptation and resilience is dealing with uncertainty, the impossibility of predicting what's going to happen, because we do not understand the science of climate well enough. That means keeping your options open. So these 2 concepts of robustness and flexibility are important to bear in mind when you're thinking about how you influence national adaptation plans. And then the final, yes, finance. I talked about finance a little bit already. We need to up the amount of finance that's going into water. It's currently very, very low, as Jose has said. And the WASH community I think we need to think about how we're presenting WASH projects in terms of adaptation and making sure facilities like the Green Climate Facility we are able to access that funding. But again, I want to put the emphasis on many other sources of funding, which we should not just be looking at climate finance, nor indeed official development assistance alone. Then finally, nature, the fifth campaign element. This is, I think, the realization that if we're not working with nature, we are going to be destroying nature. And with that, for water comes an awful lot of implications for the way that water runs through the system. So we're going to be reinforcing that message throughout our campaigning. Those 5 campaigns are in implementation. And one particular element I wanted to focus on is something. You go on mute, please. I don't know who that is. What we launched at the Climate Adaptation Summit last month is the Adaptation Action Coalition, which is an additional campaign to support the work the Dutch were doing through the Global Commission on Adaptation. And this is a coalition. Founding members are the UK, the Netherlands, unsurprisingly, Egypt, St. Lucia, Malawi, and Bangladesh. And this is an opportunity for the governmental side, led by these founding partners, to come together through events and through lobbying and dialogue to raise the ambition in other countries, and to encourage those to come forward with strong national adaptation plans. The 3 sectors that this coalition will focus on are health, infrastructure, and water. Well, that's WASH, isn't it? So I think the WASH community is very well set up to get involved in that campaign. And we're going to lead an event probably in about 2 months' time. And I really want to ask if the SWA community wants to be part of that event at a very high level to launch the work that we are now discussing through NDCs and national action plans. Side by side with all this government work is a process which Jose mentioned, which is the Marrakesh Partnership, GCA, which is essentially the non-state or non-governmental actors coming together. And if I were honest, I would say that this partnership, the Marrakesh Partnership, has probably done more on water than the governmental side through these 2 campaigns called Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. And there is a climate action pathway, especially for water. Now, I don't know if I can share my screen. Is it possible to allow me to share my screen? Because I've got a couple of slides I'd like to show you to see how that is going to be structured. And I think you'll recognize
the
WASH.
Go ahead, Andy. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Here we go. That's working on my machine, unlike other things. Now, can you see this great picture?
Yes, we can. If you can go to presentation mode, that would even make it better for all of us, because now it's small.
Weird, isn't it? It means I can't see any faces, but that's fine. Is that good?
Yes.
Fantastic. So as you can see, this is represented by sector. The protect and restore bit, which is the source, if you like, wetlands and watersheds and water basins. The production side, which is, if you like, the economic element where water is used. And then the all-important and often neglected reuse side, which is about wastewater. And so there you'll see the impact areas, which are water resources, people, agriculture, food, energy, infrastructure, and wastewater, and the impact areas and the levers of change. And what's important is down the bottom there, the goal years, 2021, 2025, 2030, and 2040. I think this is a really good basis for national action plans. I think this is laid out in a very constructive and structured way. It represents, I think, virtually all the elements of the water sector that I recognize, and all the players as well, industry, civil society, the research and evidence elements, and of course, government. Now, we have to get these plans together in order to get money. So I think that's ultimately what we need to focus on in these campaigning. This is about presenting fundable plans and projects which will get finance initially from the official development assistance sources, but ultimately from the private sector. So I can share these slides later on. I don't think I've got time to go into any more details. So I'll stop sharing now. But I just wanted to draw your attention to the Marrakesh Partnership, which is operating globally and increasingly will be operating in your own countries. These are the non-governmental members, and I think they're a very powerful and vital point. I think just to finish off, those pathways are really important. And we have 2 climate champions who are there to make the link between the non-governmental and the governmental. Gonzalo Munoz from Chile, and Nigel Topping from the UK. These are powerful global leaders, and they are there to help join the dots up on that. And then very, very finally, obviously looking ahead with the SWA timetable and the Indonesia event, I think in the next 6 to 7 months, if we can come up as a community with some good, solid examples of national action plans with wash and water well represented, this is something the UK would very much want to showcase at COP26. And again, that will help direct funding. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm really happy to take any questions and comments. I don't know how this is going to work, but I hope the translators managed to get my English clearly enough. I'm not going to do it all in French, that's for sure. Thank you.
Andy, thank you so much for that advice and the presentation on the different processes happening this year. Excuse me, the French interpreters on the English channel, can we?
L'interprète français.
Everything okay now? Okay, great. So there's been some activity in the chat. What I can do is highlight a couple of the questions. I see that Jose just provided a link for one of them, which was which are the 4 countries that have submitted their NAPs so that other countries could benefit from their experience. We could also put the names of those countries directly in the chat in a moment. There was a question quite early on to you, I think, Jose, but others may be able to speak to it, asking for examples of climate actors not really understanding the link to WASH. And so that might be something that we could elaborate more on. Whoever is not on mute, please mute. If everyone could just double check, thanks so much. There was another question about the fact that WASH risk assessments are very difficult to undertake, and that there are challenges in sort of the longevity of the data and what's being measured, and then how the risk and projections are calculated. So that's another one that we could talk about. And then another one that the climate adaptation in name only, what can we do about this? Neil just put a question in to Andy. Those on the sector who resist the role and need for private finance in the sector. And there's a question on the national adaptation plan. Is Gambia part of it? So there's a link that Jose put about the national adaptation plans in the chat above. So that's a place where you can check where your country's at on these things. I see that we're running close to time. Jose, Andy, do you want to each take about 2 minutes and respond to some of these questions? I confirm that we will be sharing the PowerPoint presentations. We've seen a couple of requests for that, and we'll also make an effort to translate them so that all partners can benefit. Jose, in 2 minutes, answer all those questions?
Yeah, sure. No, at least a little bit of it. Just making good and efficient time here. The 4 countries from the less developed countries group are Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Togo. Those 4 countries have already submitted their NAPs. Just again, a reminder that the NAPs are to be submitted by all developing countries, not just from the group of the 47 less developed countries. Yes, I've shared the link to all the submissions that have been made, where you can find those 4 and the other submissions from developing countries. If we can draw your attention into a good example, it could definitely be the Fiji submission of their national adaptation plan that you can see has plenty of references to the waste sector, including a full section on adaptation for water and sanitation. In terms of my own personal experience, sometimes it's been when talking with high-level climate officials, and they have shared the concern that it's difficult for them, when they are covering so many topics. They are covering energy, transportation, agriculture, health, all the sectors. That's the problem that they face. In some cases, they need help in understanding the links between climate change and our sector. Specifically, I have encountered many climate senior officials having difficulties to visualize the links between climate change and sanitation. Therefore, I started my presentation by highlighting the issues that you may face by providing sanitation in deprived and flood-prone areas. This is a good connection, very visual. In terms of waste risk assessments, as we have already mentioned, there are tools by SWA partners in the tools portal that can help you with that. There are participatory approaches that they don't need to be based in very complicated and scientific information only. Remember that in many cases in the waste sector, some of the interventions may have a lifespan of 1, 2, 3 decades. So projections towards the end of the century are not really going to be the most helpful information to inform waste programming. We are looking in many cases at observed impacts of climate change over the last few decades. So not so much concern about the end of the century, but first starting to understand what has happened in the last few decades. And if I have any
Thanks. Jose, no, that's great. I think we should hand it over to Andy. And Andy, I note that in the meantime, a couple more questions have come in. I don't know if you've been following the chat box, but I'm just going to give you the floor and let's see what we can cover.
Right. My last gasp attempt. One thing I really wanted to say was at the end of it, and I meant to say this, I think the SWA brings so much to the table on climate change, and I really encourage you to get engaged in this process. If you're not already engaged, find your focal point and go and have a conversation with them and help them. As Jose said, these are on the whole very under-resourced people. There were a couple of questions on private sector, and I am actually a private sector advisor in my spare time. And I think I just wanted to say that I think the message there to government is it's not to privatise, but it's to look at how you create conditions for better investment. And in the UK, we've had experience of underinvestment in the water sector. We chose to privatise. That's not the right model for every country by any means, but there is definitely much more interest in the investment community in water, because they recognise it's a finite resource and it has some investment potential over the long term, because it will always be in demand. And I'm talking to investors, pension funds, who say that all they need is 2% return on investment, but it's got to be guaranteed. And that word guarantee is hard in less developed countries, let's be honest. The risks, the political risks are high and the business risks are high. So what we do as donors is try and blend our ODA funding, offer concessional funding to start with, but try and get some of the business machinery to work. And part of that is around water pricing. We know the poor pay too much for water. They pay too much for water. So there's some flexibility there. And cheap water is wasted. And that happens in agriculture particularly, but we've got to get the match right on affordability. And I think the other thing I just wanted to say quickly is UK industry is really, really ready to share its experience on how it went to net zero. And they've got so much knowledge about reducing emissions now. They're very happy to share that. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andy. And thank you everyone for the activity happening on the chat here. We have recorded this session and we've recorded the chat. So we are taking good note of all of these questions and your recommendations. There's recommendations on how we need to package our messaging, how we most effectively reach climate decision makers. There's some recommendations around how we devote more attention to sanitation. So we are noting all of this, and there will certainly be a follow-up. As Jose said, we are planning more webinars on climate to support the partnership to effectively engage in this space. We have taken note of the votes, and we'll be communicating soon on when those webinars will be and what the topics will be. We will try to stagger the timing of those webinars so that we capture different time zones each time and try to reach as much of the partnership as possible. We will circulate the PowerPoints and just really look forward to staying in touch with all of you as we embark on this priority focus this year. So I think I'll conclude and thank all of you for your time and your
un ratito, ya va.
And wishing you all a fantastic day. Looking forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks.
Look
Gracias a
also-
todos. Yusef.
Merci beaucoup.
Bye.
Gracias.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Gracias. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. God bless you.
I see friends.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Mamunata for Burkina Faso. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
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 Thank you to the interpreters.
Merci à tout le monde.
I think I will end the meeting now. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Angie.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jose. Take care.